Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to go over a topic that many of us use, many of us talk about, and very few of us understand the current situation, views on the union. So why don't we start with introductions?
Okay. I'll go first. I'm Christine Crane. I am the recording secretary for SEIU Local 509, and SEIU stands for Service Employees International Union. And the union represents about 17,000 workers statewide, both public and private. More than half are probably of the public sector, which would be various state agencies, Department of Children and Families, Department of Mental Health, Commission for the Blind, Mass Rehab, probably about 13 in the public sector, and then there's several. We have child care workers and adjunct professors and in the public sector. And in the public sector also includes a lot of private agencies. So we're all over the state.
Israel?
Thank you. And my name is Israel Pierre. I am the treasurer of the same union, SEIU Local 509. And I think Chris gave a very good synopsis there.
Let's start with a basic question.
Okay.
What is a union?
Well, I guess it's in essence is really just a group of people speaking with one voice in order to have good working conditions and advocate for fair salaries. I mean, when you think of the word union, it's together. It's, I don't know what the Latin vernacular would be, but you know, when you think of union, aside from the work, you just think of togetherness, whole, a bunch of parts coming together, and that's basically what it is. So it's the ability of a group of people in a workplace to be able to have an advocacy and one voice, to be able to have some sense of balance at the workplace, place at the table, in order to push back and get fair working conditions and pay raises.
But now, when you think of a union, you know, I think back Upton Sinclair, the muckrakers, the 20s. And for those people who are questioning, I was not there to meet Upton Sinclair in person. I read about him. Nobody would have ever questioned the horrible conditions in the late 20s, 30s of this country. You know, the meat packers of Chicago losing their hands because they had to deal with acid. You know, people falling into food processing units and dying. Is the union still relevant today?
Absolutely. I think you know, there may not be those physical conditions that you described, but there are certainly a lot of issues within the workplace that really you know, we believe is geared towards the suppression of workers' rights. And I think, you know, if we look at, you know, the way the economy is tilted towards, it is about, you know, and you know, we believe it's very tilted towards, you know, the rich and the powerful, and we feel like, you know, there is that growing gap within the economy where the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. And so we see that, you know, we feel very strongly that you know, in order to kind of level the playing field, that there needs to be, you know, workers need a voice at the table to be able to say, you know, I have a voice in what my working conditions would be like. I have a voice, you know, in how I'm going to be treated. We saw recently within the state of Massachusetts, there was the passage of earned sick time. It was unconscionable to think that, you know, there were many folks within the state of Massachusetts that would have to choose whether to, you know, whether they needed to go to work, to be at work and to keep their jobs, or to go and see the doctor. So the fact is that, you know, even in this day and age, unions are probably even more relevant now than they were back then.
But on those benefits, I mean, when we look at, I come from the biotech industry, not heavily unionized. But when we look out and say to attract and keep our workers, we have to be competitive in salary, in benefits, just overall. Doesn't the marketplace take care of that, Israel? I mean,
so you know, the thing is that if we, you know, and I'm sure that you've heard about the Fight for 15.
Yes.
It's very popular right now. You know, the fact is that, you know, if had the marketplace completely taken care of that, then we wouldn't have had so many people right now that, you know, are in the positions that they are in. There is an unfair, I think, burden among working class people, where, you know, some of these bigger corporations don't really share in the wealth that the working class really, you know, these corporations realize their profits, and they realize a lot of their wealth based on the backs of the working class.
Well, you look at someone like, and I know we talk about Walmart a lot, but the reality is that they are the largest
one of the biggest
employer in the world.
employers.
So you look at how many times they've been sued because of things such as having people punch out of the clock and then still continue to work. There was...
Yeah, but that's breaking the law, isn't it?
Of course, but again, people that are afraid of losing their jobs don't speak out, so they don't have a voice, so they're not able to go to the boss to say, this isn't right. There was a lot of fear. They prevented unions from going in, and they were able to take advantage of people. It's not right. It's unethical. It's not moral. I mean, whatever label you want to put on it, and the reality is that it still happens. So, so therefore, if, let's say, another example, a place where there's a union, that if something like that were happening, that individual wouldn't have to say, wait a minute, I'm not treated fairly, I don't like this. They would have the union represent them, so they'd be protected, and they can come to some resolution to that.
And I guess I'm a bit naive. And, you know, as I said before the show, I do have a bias, and I'll freely admit it, that the United Auto Workers, when my dad passed away, well, when he retired, he was able to take a smaller pension, but for the life of him and my mother, that was 27 years ago. Back then, nobody cared about the medical benefits. Today, I could care less about the $300 pension.
Right.
Right.
But the fact that my blessed mother is here at 91, 27 years after my dad passed away,
Wow.
still being taken care of.
That's right.
Yeah, you know, in the spirit of transparency, I do have a conflict because the union's taking care of my mother for all these years.
Right.
But I have to ask, I mean, if I'm breaking the law, and maybe it's just I'm naive to people who are scared to stand up, I would think you got lawyers for that, you got policemen for that.
How often do policemen run into Walmart and arrest the managers? You know, how often do people speak out? And a lot of times these businesses, quite frankly, they break laws when they pollute the water. They break laws on a number of different levels. And they'll get away and cut corners in order to profit and get their bottom line up. And when they get caught, oftentimes it's really just the price of doing business. It's not that, it's a drop in the bucket for them a lot of times.
Well, we used to have that here in Milford when they had the blue laws. You know, where Sunday,
Oh, okay.
they charged back then grants $250 fine for being open on a Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And you sit there and say, okay.
Oh, yeah. That's like a little
250
finger wagging, yeah.
250
Ooh.
bucks. I think they used to hire somebody to say, okay, Israel, you're the manager today. Why? Because somebody has to be arrested.
Oh,
and
symbolic,
go sit.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're not going to put a real person. We'll just hire you to go sit and read a book.
And that's right.
Doesn't
Yeah.
that tax our legal system too?
Absolutely.
You know, and like you talked about lawyers, the thing is that these firms, you know, a lot of these firms, they have their own legal department. They have, you know, a lot of resources. And, you know, you have one worker that, let's say, hires a lawyer, doesn't have a union, hires a lawyer, they could run that worker into the ground. They could outspend that. They could keep, throwing, different legal cases together that will just, it wouldn't be really profitable for a worker to do that. And, and quite frankly, a lot of folks wouldn't be able to afford that,
Sure. That's
right? But what you find that, when there is a union and you have, one person that's being wronged and all the other employees standing up saying, you know what, we're not going to, it's one all for one and one for all. We're going to stand with this employee. Then you have a real dilemma because you can't just mistreat one when you have, the bunch that's standing up with that one person. So that's why I feel it lends to a lot of balance within the workplace, and it really reduces the injustice on
Now,
workers.
we talk about the fight for 15. I don't think anybody can argue, especially in the Northeast, that $30,000 salary isn't...
We're assuming they get full-time, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, because when I think $15, I think 2,080 hours
Right.
a year.
Yeah.
So you look and you say, I don't know anybody, do people really still pay their employees minimum wage?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
There's quite a few. There's quite a few.
Because, I see the signs at Dunkin' Donuts, where you probably don't need a lot of training to be able to work a counter, but it's, starting at $10, $11.
Yeah, a lot of, they can't get, it's tough to get
And again,
help.
that's the point about the market.
Right.
If I can't get somebody, some of these companies, if they could pay $1 an hour, they would.
They would.
Sure.
They can't.
Right.
Right.
Because
So-
they need to get the help. And companies like Dunkin' Donuts and those places, they're also feeling it, the union, kind of by virtue of the expectation they have in other places, raises the threshold on non-union places too.
But now, Israel, is the fight for 15, I hear, okay, some of these companies are talking about, we'll move to $15 in 4 years, 5 years. And I'm like, okay, let me figure out, you're paying an average of 12 now.
Right.
Are you really
The
doing...
rate of inflation, so
Yeah.
is that going to balance out?
I sit there and say, by the time we get to 15,
It'll be
is
obsolete.
it going to be the fight for 20 or...
By the time we get to 15, that might be the equivalent of what the minimum wage is right now. The fact is, and I've seen a study recently, that for every dollar the 99% earns, the top 1% earns above $960 for every $1 that the 99% make. We in that class, I certainly don't know if you hit the top 1% yet.
It would be nice.
But the fact is that we've heard a lot about trickle down economics, right? If I'm a millionaire and I get a raise, the chances are, what am I going to buy? A yacht? I might sometimes, I feel like some of these billionaires and millionaires, when they get raises, they may not even notice it, right? That goes somewhere. It's just there. When we give working people a raise, then what happens? How is that spent? That's spent on paying off their student loans. That's spent on buying a better house. It's spent on maybe medicine. So you find that when there's more money available to the 99%, there's actually more money floating in the economy and going in the economy. So the fight for 15 is really something that we stand strong on. We feel that and if we look at some of these corporations that are really fighting against paying $15 an hour, let's look at their profits. Let's look at what they make on an annual basis, and then let's see if it'll really hurt them. I think, and it's really easy for people to do the math. Just look at what those profits are and look at what they pay their employees. In this economy, we've found that there has been a lot of good middle class paying jobs that were replaced by very low wage paying jobs. And that is, it was the same union study that I was looking at, because we've found that I've known a few, quite a few folks who had good paying jobs, but as the economy started to decrease, now we have people with degrees that are working in the fast food industry. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons why this is so important for us to fight right now is that, long ago, maybe when the economy was better, yes, we did have students, a lot of students and young people, flipping burgers. Today, it's more, there's a lot of families, there's a lot
of elderly.
That's right, a lot of elderly. Walmart greeters.
When you start looking, I mean, in Milford, we've been fortunate. This will be the 11th year that we've had a surplus. But we can't forget that there's a lot of people in town who built Milford.
That's right.
The reason we're here, and we got this beautiful studio and all that, is because a lot of our elderly busted their hump to build this town, and they're living on $1,500 a month. And I've always said, if I want to go to Dunkin' Donuts and spend $3 on a cup of coffee, my money, I can do it.
That's right.
Before I spend $3 of your money, I got to be triple careful. Because, a few dollars here, a few dollars there may mean the difference of one of the elderly who built our town, who gives us the right to be here, eating tonight or getting their meds today.
That's right.
So, it's not just the young I worry about. I've had, how do I say this, spirited discussions with people who have said, if you can't afford the taxes in Milford, you have to move out. It's like, how dare you?
And go where?
That's right.
Yeah, but it's not even go where.
It's like, yeah.
How dare you? You're here because of them. This is our town.
Folks
I've been joking with my daughter saying, you're finally a true Milfordian. You're third generation, and you live within 2 miles of your mother. I think that's a great thing.
I do too. My daughter's close by. I love it.
Actually, she's fourth now, because my grandfather, my mother, me.
Okay.
So she's fourth generation, and she's within 2 miles of her mother.
Wow.
I mean, that's something that
It's nice to keep family close and together.
I want to keep at all costs. The ability of people to enjoy, what they built. But when I hear this 15, I thought it was a fight for this year, not for 5 years from now.
But the other argument too to support that is that for businesses, they keep their help. They don't have to train. There's less turnover. I mean, it's profitable for them at that point, looking at it from that perspective.
But we do that by paying more.
Well, if
voluntarily.
But they don't voluntarily pay more. And that's why we had to raise the floor, or we're looking to raise the floor for everybody, so that it helps businesses because it keeps the workforce stable. It helps the economy because people have more money to spend, more discretionary spending, more spend even on food, basic stuff. And it allows them to stay in the town or not have to move.
And now when you look at, the C-level players of these companies, and they say they have to compete, when you say profits, if they don't return a certain amount to the stockholders, stockholders won't buy their stock. And that's, I always struggle with, okay, we in biotech, yes, we can talk about we're saving lives, and all the goodness that we do. At the end of the day, when you've got an investor trying to survive for their pension, they'll invest in a phone company as easy as in a biotech. So we've got to show them profits that entice them to invest in us. How do you, if somebody told you, yeah, you could take away from the top 1%, but will that really ever translate down?
I don't know that any studies that have been done, and what I've read, that increasing people's salary at 15 has taken away anything from the company and the stockholders. I've not heard that at all. And I wish I could quote something.
Yeah,
and
I guess the 15 just seems not significant to me. I mean, it is if you're making 12.
Right.
Right? I mean, we got to keep in mind that if I'm making $10, $12 an hour, 15 is going to be substantial.
Sure.
Right.
But as far as overall corporate cost, I can't see, especially New England, and I can't speak for the middle of the country. When you get to the square states, they may be paying people $10 an hour.
I'm not, yeah, I don't know. I'm not as aware. You might be a little bit more informed about what the different rates of pay are in different areas.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it really depends on the state, you know, state, location, you know, things like that. But I do just want to get back to that piece about, you know, profits for shareholders.
Sure.
If we look at the last 5 years, CEOs, leaders of corporation, made just in bonuses. We're not talking about salaries to them. Their bonuses were in the billions of dollars. Just their bonuses had nothing to do with, you know, sending some of that to the corporate shareholders. And so we're talking about, you know, very few just in bonuses making billions of dollars. And that's where the greed is coming from. You know, I think it is possible to have a free market economy and yet at the same time pay people a living wage. But it goes back to what we call corporate greed.
So if they're so worried about the shareholders, why then would they absorb and take all those bonuses?
You see, and that,
I mean, you know, so they're worried about paying people $15 and pushing back because, you know, we have a responsibility to our shareholders. But they're okay with taking billions of dollars?
see, and that's the part that I've always been stuck on. I have a lot less of an issue if a CEO does extremely well because his stockholders did incredibly well. You know, I think of the days of Lee Iacocca, where he said, I'm going to take $1 in salary and the rest in stock. Okay. When Chrysler did well, he made tens of millions of dollars.
Right.
Nothing wrong with making money. It's about being fair.
But that was my point.
Right.
You know, I do have an issue when I see automatic salary jumps, that you watch somebody lead a company and the stock crashes, and yet they still get,
I know.
you know, 7, 10, whatever $1 million.
I'm not sure what that thinking
I don't
is.
understand where that one fits right.
It feels as though the Harvard Business School, I don't mean to blame Harvard all the time, but there's this philosophy, it feels, that generations ago, when your father worked for the car company, there was one CEO that stayed at that company, and they didn't look at the short-term gain. They were visionaries. They looked down the road, the big
Yes.
picture. Nowadays, we have people looking at the next quarter, and that's it.
Right.
And it's short-term myopic thinking, but that seems to be the approach to business nowadays.
And that's the way the compensation committees at the large corporations, you know, I hate to say it, but it's almost like our politicians. They're looking for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, my cycle is 2 years. What can I do to make me look better for 2 years? Even if I run up a deficit and 3 years from now we're in deep trouble, that's another election cycle.
Right.
You know, this whole quarterly thing many times is an issue
right.
because you're trading off the long-term health. You know, yes, I can take a lot of morphine and I'm going to feel good for an hour or two. But when I come off the drugs,
I still got to deal with everything.
now it's going to be that much worse. And I think
Right.
sometimes this whole focus on quarterly earnings doesn't give us the long-term perspective.
Well, and then the people there don't have that commitment for the long-term health of the company.
Well, if your leadership isn't committed, you know, if they're into it for a year or two, why would the workers? You know, but on the other hand, I can't just say, take away the money from the CEO, because if I can't hire the right person, then who's going to lead the company?
Right.
Well,
Right.
it seems to me that we're thinking that there are so few people that have any kind of ability that we have to pay them that absorbent amount. I would argue that probably a lot of people out there, maybe with not as much experience, but if a company's not doing well, again, why would you pay them that much money?
Well, I mean, you can make the argument that, okay, if I got paid a mere $30 million next year, right, versus the 55 I'm getting.
You're going to take one for the team.
Yeah, I mean, would I, 30 million? I'm not going to do it. Oh, come on. You know, and again, my problem is I want to see it in performance. You know, Israel, if they're going to pay you 50 million because you grew the value of the company and everybody that was a stockholder got 10 times more than you, 100 times more than you, I don't have as big of an issue. But if your stock goes down, I want money back.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But the health of a company is also based on the health of your workforce.
That's right.
And then again, paying 15, treating the employees fairly is also speaks to the health of the workforce. You keep people happy, they stay, they're committed, they're going to perform better.
Again, in the spirit of transparency, I'm beating you up over 15. I pay my intern 16.
I applaud you for that.
You know what I mean? It's like we've got a
Yeah.
kid from college,
Yeah.
and I'll admit, I want top talent.
I don't blame you.
And we've been paying between $16 and $20 an hour for our interns.
Wow.
Guess what? We've got a lot of kids who want to come back.
Oh, sure.
You know, it's not,
There's an incentive there.
yeah, and it's not a tremendous wage that it's going to affect their life, but it's 16 to 20 bucks an hour for a college kid.
Yeah,
That's
It's
right.
not bad.
that's good.
But again, it's our view that if I want to be able to pick, now could I get the same for 15? Yeah, I probably could. Who cares? You know, it's a college kid. They're living off their mom and dad most of the time.
Right.
But it's the idea. I'm expecting a lot out of them. So I can be mean and expect a heck of a lot more if I'm paying you 15 to 20 bucks an hour and have a clear conscience. You know, if it's 5 o'clock, I don't expect you walking out the door if you got work to do. If you got to stay till 5:20, I'm paying you for it, but you stay till 5:20.
Right. Sure.
Right. Right.
So
But
again,
it's a fair win-win
Yeah.
exchange. You're paying them a fair wage, and you're expecting them to perform. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with that at all.
Right.
then, oh, go ahead.
And we do believe too that when, you know, if we raise the base, right, it also raises the ceiling. It makes folks, so let's say we raise the minimum wage. It means that, you know, those who are earning close to that minimum wage will, you know, we believe that they'll automatically get a bump up as well. You know, Chris said we represent a lot of public sector workers. And there is a domino effect. You know, for instance, Local 509 represents the Department of Transitional Assistance, you know, their workforce. You know, and if people are paid a decent wage, we could see some of those caseloads decreasing, even with the Department of Children and Families.
So DTA would be the SNAP program, food stamps, and other
Food
benefits.
stamps.
So the more people make, the less they need from
The
the
less-
state. So that kind of takes off the table.
But doesn't that kind of, okay, if I'm making $10 an hour and I'm getting food stamps and help from the state, wait a minute, you mean if I make 15, they're going to take that away?
Not necessarily, but it'll offset that. It could offset
No,
that.
I like it
It
from a
could.
government point of view,
It could have said
We want to
that.
make
But-
people more self-sufficient and more independent. I mean,
but it
ideally.
may not help the worker if you take away money that I'm getting because I'm only making 10 bucks an hour, because now I'm making 15.
But it also may help them in that there's more money within the state to go to services,
No, okay.
right? So you know, on one hand, you know, you may you may be making a wage where you don't. Thankfully, you don't have to go and look for food stamps, but you're getting better quality of services on the other end. So
What percentage of workers in Massachusetts are union versus non-union? Do you have any idea?
I don't know in terms of Massachusetts. I know nationally the statistics are about, I think it's like at 11%, and most of them are public sector workers. I think a lot of the private areas, there's less unionized.
Okay, now I got to ask you. 90% are not union. If the union's so cool, why only 10% signing up?
Well, it's not a matter of choice. I think there's a lot of pushback, union busting. A lot of states have a right to work law now, which is
But that doesn't forbid me from being union,
No,
right?
but it's a union busting law, and it's a way of chipping away. Look what happened in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it sounds like at 10%, they've taken big chunks.
And it's been chipping away over the years, and some of it, I think, and this is just from where I said, you're talking about the struggles with Upton Sinclair, and in Lowell, we had the hub of unionism there when they had those horrific fires, and many women died in factories that were poorly insulated and had no fire safety. I think, and then people fought to get unions because they had no voice, and that was real important. And then they saw that. Now we move forward, and I think the height of the union was in the 1950s, like right after World War II. It was like everybody was
20, 30%, right?
A very large percentage, and then we had middle class, a very strong middle class. We had good jobs. It was kind of a well-oiled machine for a while, and then there was that shift, and that started probably in the 1980s. And a big step was when Reagan had fired all those air traffic controllers and forbid them from unionizing. And so there was that philosophy and that attitude, and then slowly chipping away. And people have gotten kind of complacent. They forget what it's like without a union. So a lot of people don't realize the benefits they have. And the scales are tipping a little bit in that direction.
Let me play devil's advocate. The impression that the union protects the underachievers, because the overachievers don't need protection.
Okay.
What do you say?
Let me go ahead.
And so I think bad management protects the underachievers. The fact is that what a union does and what a contract does is give every worker the right to be heard. There's a process, progressive process to discipline or termination, whatever the issue is. So so unions facilitate a fair process, right, within different collective bargaining agreements. My view is that it is lazy managers who do not really look at what's happening in their workplace with some of their workers, because I'm sure 9 out of 10 times it's very few within a work site. There might be the one or the two people that may make the rest look bad, right? But it's this whole notion about union protecting lazy workers or very or underachievers. I think it is a view that is out there, but I really it's one of my things is that it is about a process and respecting that process.
Yeah. I like to associate like Alan Dershowitz. Okay, he has some very unpopular clients he's defended. But it's more about protecting the Constitution and the process than it is about the client for him. So I look at the union, and it's like the law. People get, well, why does the union protect someone if they don't do their job? No, what we protect is making sure they're treated fairly. If they don't do their job, if they're not a good worker, the union can't protect that. They just make sure that they're treated according to the contract, according to the agreement.
But, will you concede that the impression, I'll take the school teachers. We are so fortunate in Milford. Our teachers are just superb. Years ago, when we got in trouble, other towns, their teachers were voting to defer their raises. Our teachers came back and said, don't kill our young, and we'll forego a raise this year. Wow. That was union-led.
That's right.
You can't ask.
We've done that
for
in
more.
our union. Right.
But now, I can't, if somebody is just outstanding, I can't pay them any more. They get 2 cents for their step and 1 penny for their lane. And in industry, what I struggle with is when I have somebody who is just outstanding, I can give them a bonus. Right. They get a bigger raise.
But you're not using taxpayers' money. With teachers and with our unions, it's taxpayer money. So you have to be mindful of that.
But why is that different? Why can't I pay with taxpayer money more to the outstanding?
There's a process in our union, and we have what we call the EPRS, the Employees Evaluation, And in that evaluation, if someone struggles, is not doing well, and they get an overall belows, there's an automatic step raise they get each year. They don't get that step raise until
I was not under the impression. I thought if you survived another year, our contract said you got, if the lanes went up 2%, you went up 2%.
Our contract, in our particular contract, this is for the public sector, okay, not for the private sector.
No, but I'm thinking school teachers. Wouldn't they be
I think they
firemen,
have
policemen?
school teachers, all municipal employees. So I don't know what their contract says, but there's certain benefits you can get if you get a higher degree or if you get
Yes, you automatically move a lane when you get your master's.
So there's some incentives like that. I know some of our agencies offer overtime, but I hear what you're saying about not being able to give someone bonuses. I guess the question comes in is how do you measure it? We're a business, you got profits. There's a measurable way of demonstrating. With us, it's like, it's more difficult, I think, to measure.
But you know something, Christine, I heard that, but when I went to the school principals, and they would say you can't measure it. And I said, really? You mean you don't know your top 10 teachers? Like that, they could name. I said, how about your low 10? Like that, they knew. And my problem is, I would advocate for paying all teachers in Milford $100 grand a year, as long as we could use at will. Okay, so the bottom 5%, yeah, you betcha. Because what kills me is when I see these young teachers cutting. Well, I shouldn't use a specific, but working at a grocery store, trying to make enough money to give their family. Wait a minute, I spend when I was a parent with kids in high school, if I got 2 hours a night with my kids, I was excited. I coached soccer, so I got hours with them.
Yeah.
They had no choice, they had to be with me. But these people get 6 to 8 hours. God, I want them fighting. I want the most talented, best, smartest, most dedicated people fighting to be the ones spending 6 to 8 hours. But it scares me because, again, the impression I have, it is nigh on impossible to get rid of somebody who's not performing at a municipal level. Fact or fallacy?
I think it's fallacy. And speaking to what Israel had mentioned before, I can't tell you how many times that you have workers, and there's a progressive discipline. There's ways of keeping track. It takes a little effort. And oftentimes that doesn't happen. And then what happens is usually some kind of critical event takes place. And then all that frustration, and then the worker gets excessively disciplined. And we go in and say, wait a minute now, had there been training, did you tell this worker that they were doing X and Y and try to correct it? No, you go from 0 to 60, that's not fair. And then stupidly, because there are times, quite frankly, I mean, for a union person, sometimes it's like, yeah, get rid of this person. I can't say that, but it brings us all down. But then what happens is then we'll go and go through our grievance process, and because they didn't do what they were supposed to, the worker can get back to work. How does that help them or the agency?
Doesn't help anybody.
Or whatever. Right, exactly. So and it's not my job to drop a dime. I mean, as a supervisor, you would try to guide and encourage. You let your.
But Christine, we have that in industry. If I just walk in and say, "Bang, you're dead," even though you're at will, why? Because I don't like you.
That's right.
Wait a minute, wrongful termination. I'm exposing my company and myself
to a litigation.
To a big lawsuit.
That's right.
Because if I have to go in and say, let's see, you got great reviews, you've done your job.
That's right.
I just don't like you. You're a Yankees fan. I mean, that may be grounds to a lot of people to sit there and say, that's
From where I sit,
blasphemy.
that's reasonable.
You get down Connecticut
Maybe
way.
we should use another example.
You get down Connecticut way in New York.
Yeah.
Being a Yankees fan doesn't seem like a terminatable offense.
Right. And and the fact is, we've seen. I mean, we represent different industries. The fact is that we've seen in some of our private sector agencies where a manager leaves off to a greener pasture, new one comes in and feels like to show who's the head honcho here, and so there are times where good workers, good hard-working workers, have been unduly disciplined or they tried to fire them or terminate them. And the thing is, I mean, as with Milford school system, I think we're really fortunate. I wish we could pay our teachers more in Milford. Actually, and Chris knows this, the primary reason I moved to Milford was because of the great reputation of the public schools in Milford. And I've been fortunate to speak and to interact with teachers from the different schools. The phenomenal group. And certainly I wish we could have paid them more, and hopefully one day we may be able to. But I think you're right. There are many school districts out there, I'm talking outside of Milford now, where you would want to make sure that you attract good skills because they're taking care of your kids. I saw something on the news last night actually where teacher's assistant abused a child.
Yes.
I don't know if you...
She got arrested for pushing into a wall. Right. Special needs of all...
Special needs child. Yeah.
Of all
down
children.
The stairs. Yeah.
Pushing them into a wall. And
right.
If anybody can rationalize that behavior, I'm at a loss.
Mm.
Right. Right. And so you do have some situations like these, but that situation we know of because it happened, and that's not the norm by and large,
mm-hmm.
right? That's not the norm. But yeah, I do agree with you on that level that it would be nice to pay our teachers more.
But, even we mentioned before, the fight for 15 took a big step forward in California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm not really impressed that in 5 years they'll go from 11 and change to 15. It really doesn't seem like a huge step, candidly. Because I have a funny feeling at 3% a year,
Yeah.
they would have been awful. Well, again, $1 may not sound like a lot, but I guess if you're trying to scrounge $14,
Mm-hmm.
If you're making 14,
Right.
to get 15,
That's right.
it's 8-9%, it's a big jump. But then I read that the local unions now want an exemption for union workers to not have to pay 15. I don't know enough of the details, but it seems
I don't
weird,
either.
doesn't it?
It does. I can't speak to it because I remember reading briefly, and I didn't go into depth on the article.
It would put the union shops at a competitive advantage, but it would seem against what the union stands for.
Right. Why would you want to regress and not advocate for a strong salary? I don't understand that either.
Yeah, I don't know what the prevailing circumstances, so I can't speak to it with knowledge. I mean, I could tell you about our local. It is our position that we would like all of the bargaining units that we represent who pay under $15 an hour to pay $15 an hour.
So you wouldn't support saying everybody that's non-union pay 15, but the union people we're going to stick?
No, I wouldn't support that. I don't think.
I mean, it just seems counterintuitive to me.
I mean, I would support $15 as a minimum wage for all.
For everybody.
That's what I
That
would
makes
support.
more sense. If you're going to fight for that
Right.
high ground.
Right. I don't understand.
But again, I don't know the specifics.
Yeah.
So
Again, I don't know the details.
Yeah.
So it's too easy to rush to judgment
Right.
and say bad union. I mean.
And there are some unions that have been mismanaged, and there are some unions that, so it's like anything, it's a system
Christine,
that's imperfect.
There's some companies that have been well managed, there's some companies that have been mismanaged.
Yeah.
I have no doubt in my mind that a union is like a company. You're going to have better and worse. Now, again, being naive, we have the LMNOP local 152 dash. How does that all work? I mean, I grew up with the AFL, you got the
AFL-CIO, right.
That was the union. I mean, that's what my dad always worked for. There was never all these other unions. We never understood that. What's the deal? How many unions? How do they figure out?
Well, you probably know some more about the international process now. We're an international union. They're based out of Washington, D.C., and we have a president of the International, and then under her is her support and staff, and then under that, you know, nationwide and worldwide, they have different areas, and each, like our local was established to represent social workers and.
So is it discipline based? I mean, I could understand if you told me the meat packers in the Midwest have different needs than the social workers in Massachusetts. So even though it's a union, and maybe they filter to the top,
right?
There's different groups or divisions.
They are, for the
We
most
have different
part.
divisions.
Yeah, but we've expanded a little bit, it was public sector for a lot of agencies which hired a lot of social workers, and within that, and then we started organizing private sector that were workers, maybe not all of them necessarily social workers, but worked in social service agencies that receive state funds.
Now those aren't traditional blue collar jobs.
No, they're not traditional blue-collar jobs. There's some level of skill and education the workers need.
Well, when you say municipal workers, and I'm not thinking of the burger flippers union.
I'm saying municipal in terms of town employees versus state. So when I say municipal, it's like
I'm trying to get an idea
fire,
of like blue collar versus white collar in your union. Percentage, any idea?
We have in 1199, would that be more, you're thinking...
Are we talking about within Massachusetts or?
Well,
Or just
I mean,
in
I don't know. In your union,
Yeah.
so you're familiar with your union more than any others.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, candidly, it's always of academic curiosity what's going on in Nebraska. But what matters is what's going on at the center of the universe, but even in Massachusetts.
Right.
Right. So in SEIU, Service Employees International Union, so that's the big umbrella. Within that, there are different locals that represent different types of workers.
So we have several
SEIU.
divisions within SEIU. So we have SEIU, like Chris said, which is a blanket organization. We have a healthcare division. We have a public services division. We have service industry division.
Which is the largest?
The largest is the healthcare division.
Now, when you say healthcare, that is a broad brush. What kind of healthcare employees are the largest part of healthcare?
So we have a lot of, the healthcare division is big. For instance, we have a lot of big locals.
What is it, nurses?
Nurses,
Is it
CNAs,
physicians?
No, physicians have their own, I think it's...
Yeah.
They have a separate, so the M&A represents nurses.
In Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
We have, I think in
SEIU 1199, which is the largest local within SEIU that has over 300,000 members.
Holy moly.
Right, and they are actually based in New York. And we have 1199 here that represent a lot of home care workers. And, you know, and we have like the Kaiser employees out in California that, you know.
But 10, 11% are union. Why? What does the other 89% not know?
I can't speak for the other 89%. I think, again, we were talking about that shift in philosophy starting in the 80s and then kind of pulling away, getting comfortable. Why do I need a union?
But Reagan got away with it because the public supported him.
Right.
And the question was, why do they need a union? And frankly, I never got a real straight answer. And he got away with it.
That's
if
right.
we really believed it was wrong, if the other 89% stood up and said, I'm not going to vote for you if you play this, he would have had to have changed, right?
Well, not many people really understood or felt the air traffic controller workers. In other words, sadly, it was a small enough group that I think union-wise we were not happy, and that was certainly a blow to us. However, did that affect you? Most people are like, oh, isn't that awful? And they move on and they don't realize it. They don't feel the ripple effect until it gets to a point where now it's affecting me. Now I'm not being treated fairly. Now I got fired wrongfully. I wish I had a union. Or I'm not going to get a pay raise because they don't feel like giving it, and I can't go and ask for a pay raise myself. they're not providing me with appropriate time for lunch, or whatever the case may be. Anything that a union can try to, fight for as
But again, is that
collectively.
mainly blue collar? Because when I see our industry, if you're not treated well, there's Pfizer, Novartis, there's a whole series of pharmaceutical companies out there. And if you're one of the top performers, they're going to pull you in. So if you don't get a raise or you don't get conditions that are nice, you vote or you complain with your feet.
Right, right.
But
I referenced earlier, we do have a lot of folks with all kinds of degrees that are struggling to get good paying jobs right now. Local 509 started recently representing the adjunct professors within, the state of Massachusetts.
Private colleges
The private
that were not unionized.
Private. So Tufts would be an example. Tufts University, and
Northeastern.
Brandeis.
Bentley.
But what can the
Bentley.
union do
Well,
for people who want? I mean, we talk about union contracts and how the union obligations, and we've had this discussion. Because of our union contracts, we have to go up 4% on our budget. No, you don't. The union contracts only deal with the survivors. If we say you get 2%, that means there's less people employed. What can the union do to help find a job? If I'm not going to let my budget go up, I'm just going to hire less people.
Well, and that's the prerogative of the employer. The union can't dictate how many people
Right.
we can argue about workload.
Yes.
And so, I mean, the state could say, well, my agency, we're only going to hire.
You can't put 500 cases that way.
Right.
They can't
They
deal
can
with
try
this
to do
child.
that, but we have workload expectations. So that's how the union pushes back. I mean, employees have a right to write policy. Employees have a right to expect certain things from us. What we argue for, again, is workload impact, and we can
What
bargain
do you do
over
with these
that.
adjunct professors? I mean, they're not full-time, right?
That's right. They're
No,
not
that's
full-time,
right.
they're not paid the same, they're not, no job security.
And the fact is some of them are not full-time because it's a saving mechanism for a lot of universities to let me pay you per course rather than having you on full
I'm going
faculty
to keep
where I
you
have to
at
give you
31
benefits.
hours, and
Right.
I'm not going to have to pay you 20
I don't have to
grand
pay you benefits.
That's
And
right.
and it's a travesty to see. I met an adjunct actually from the state of Florida. He said, and he talked about the orientation day, and he was, telling his students about the course and talking to the parents and stuff. He said, they never knew that at the end of that day, the professor who is teaching these courses to their kids, who each kid, I think, it was like $35,000 per year. They didn't realize, the kids nor the parents realized that at the end of the day, that professor was living out of his car. It's disgraceful. And a lot of universities think, okay, let's just get a bunch of adjuncts. They don't have to be full-time employees. We'll save on the, having to pay benefits. And quite frankly, some of them have some very large endowments. It's unconscionable.
Kind of like the shareholders and the stocks. I mean,
I
when
mean,
you
you
think
got a
about
hard
it.
time. Harvard's always had the issue, when they came back to us and said they have to cut back some of the programs because their endowment dropped to a mere $27 billion.
That's so sad.
Wait a minute, where's my tissue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting there saying, help me understand something. Well, it was 34.
Right.
Yeah, I
What
was young,
34?
thin, and had hair. That was the old days,
Yeah.
And sure enough, here it is a number of years later, they're back to 34.
Right. And what are they? The second largest non-profit in the world?
I
Harvard?
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I heard, I don't know how true this is, but I heard the Harvard is the second largest non-profit in the world after the after Rome.
After the Vatican?
After the Vatican.
Wow.
After the Vatican.
No, if you'd asked me, I would have said the U.S. government. They seem to be the largest non-profit.
And it is sad that union density is on decline, partially because we have so much fight against unions, and you think about the top 1% spending millions of dollars in trying to get their candidates elected to enact legislation like right to work. And so, they talk about big union bosses. The fact is that, big union bosses, you put probably every union in the United States combined, you bring every resource together, it still wouldn't be able to compete with a lot of these Wall Street companies.
But Israel, when I hear right to work, to me that means I have a choice.
Right.
I can be union or not union. Why, if the union offered me all this good stuff, would I not want to be union?
And again, it's about the pockets they have for messaging. The
way they frame the issue makes it seem like, well, I want a choice. But what happens is, right now, we have what they call a closed shop for public sector.
Framingham was that way. You want to work at General Motors, you were part of the union.
Right. So if you chose not to be in the union, you had to pay an agency fee. So instead of paying union dues, there was a fee that you paid to the agency. So you're still paying something. And even if you didn't want to be in the union, we had an obligation to still protect you. So you enjoyed all the rights of the union. Now, with this right to work movement is that it allows people not to join the union, not to pay an agency fee, but still get all the protection. So I'm sitting here as a union member saying, I'm paying my dues. You're not, and you're getting the same benefits I am. Union busting approach.
Well, why would I join the union then?
That's right.
I mean, that I can understand saying, wait a minute, if I'm going to get the same pay,
Well,
same
that's
benefits,
why join the union?
That's
why
right.
bother paying?
Exactly, and that's why it's a union
You get a
busting.
small percentage that out of, Catholic guilt or whatever they want to call it, I'll pay. But I would think the vast majority would say there's no benefit.
We represent childcare workers, family childcare providers. And, there was this case, the Harris versus Quinn case, that was heard by the Supreme Court that effectively, did away with closed shops for family childcare providers and other in-home workers across the United States. And what we had was the right to work in Washington. We saw this happening in the state of Washington, where right to work was sending out mails, lots of mailers and stuff, saying to the childcare providers who were already part of the union, give yourself a raise this Christmas, stop paying union dues. They message it really well. They have a big war chest of money and machinery behind them to do that, and to, quite frankly, to buy democracy, and that's what they've been doing.
So what happens now is
I
you don't
hate to
have
do this,
Uh-oh.
but we're at the end of our time. What I'd like to do is come back.
Absolutely.
And let's continue, because this is fascinating. A lot of the impressions, again, I may be naive about them, but there's a lot of people like me who don't understand. But I'd like to invite you back later and to continue.
Love to come back.
Thank you.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers and maybe 2 or 3 more union people who are going to watch the show, good night, may God bless, and like everything else we've always talked about on the show, learn. Find out about unions, about not being unions, so you can make an informed decision. Good night all, may God bless, and hope to see you again.
Not too long since I've been home, been running all my life